welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down Backrooms. I'm not doing it, mate. No, I'm not there's no way I'm doing it.
You har me hearties. Come down to the Heavy Spoilers Show where we've got a Backrooms Breakdown for ye. Got all your Easter eggs and hidden details and a wealth of gold and riches for ye to plunder.
Backrooms is now out digitally, and in this video we're going to be breaking it all down. In it, I want to talk about the hidden details, those little things you might have missed, and also the eerie final shot and what it really means. Now, in case you don't know, the Backrooms is an online community-driven creepypasta that originated when an anonymous user posted this image to 4chan in May 2019. The accompanying text read, "If you're not careful and you no clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. God save you if you hear something wandering around nearby, because it sure as hell has hurt you." Whew, creepy. And I bet the guy who made that is bloody kicking himself right now. Now, in case you don't know, the term no-clipping is basically a gaming term used to describe a cheat or glitch that disables collision. It allows you to pass through walls and boundaries the game normally wouldn't allow. The post imagined that you could accidentally fall through the walls of ground of the real world and encounter a world that's hidden out of bounds. In the Backrooms universe, this is a liminal space that's become uncanny through its emptiness. I know I've worked at places like shops and bars that really have a life and atmosphere when they're open. However, when they're closed and you go through them at night with no one around, the emptiness takes on a life of its own. They feel like they should be full of people, but for some reason aren't, and there's just an eeriness about them. We've all encountered these at some point in life, and they're often used in horror films that add a sense of tension. Classic examples are stuff like an empty school corridor, shopping centers, or an office building. Hell, 28 Days Later and Vanilla Sky use locations like an empty London and New York to give the viewer a real sense of isolation. Liminal space photography has been a thing for as long as people have been able to record images, and when people began sharing these online with the invention of the internet, they really took on a life of their own. By the late 90s/early noughties, digital aesthetic made them feel weirdly nostalgic, like a memory of a place, which we see perfectly in that original Backrooms image. Now, that wasn't the first piece of liminal space photography, but it certainly popularized the genre with its eerie feel. It's also why I think they set the film in the 90s, because it just fits with the decade that we think about when we think about these images. Now, the photo itself was taken at a former furniture store in Oshkosh. Sound like Sean Connery there, Oshkosh. During this shot, it was apparently being renovated into a hobby town in 2002. It was then uploaded to the store's renovation blog in 2003 and used as the basis for the 4chan post 16 years later. It went viral, and the concept of endless piss yellow rooms and fluorescent lights was something that completely fascinated the internet. Adding to this was the idea that there was something potentially stalking you around every corner, and it was incredibly evocative to the internet horror communities. Since then, it's been used as the basis to make games, horror stories, and also some web series. One such web series was created by Kane Parsons, aka Kane Pixels on YouTube. In January 2022, he was only 16 years old and posted a Blender animated short titled The Backrooms Found Footage. In the video, we meet the protagonist Kane, who's making a film with some friends. It's set in the 90s, and there's a VHS camcorder which was actually used to obscure Parsons' CGI discrepancies. In between takes, he falls through the floor and then ends up in the Backrooms. He then explores the seemingly endless space, finds writing on the wall, and eventually gets chased by some sort of creature now known as the life form or the bacteria. The short then ends with a jump scare and the camera no clipping out the Backrooms and falling from the sky, which is when the footage is finally recovered. Now, as I'm sure you can tell from the view count, the video was incredibly successful and Kane quickly got to making more. In the end, he shot 4 additional uploads within a month of the original, but the series is still ongoing. It's quite long, very, very long, but to quickly summarize, Backrooms follows a researcher company called Async who create a doorway to the Backrooms. Knowing little about it, they embark on a way to study it along with the various people who get lost in it over time. Now, it takes place in and around the 90s, but there's a bunch of timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly stuff, and the sense that time doesn't exist in this space. Now, obviously, the characters have a lot on their plate, and being in a situation where you're constantly on edge can be very, very draining. Just kind of leaves you in a slump. I'm sure we've all felt pulled down by the world at some point, or anxious that we just have way too much to do. I've definitely felt like that myself, and haven't really talked about this much on the channel, but back in 2019 I got diagnosed with anxiety, which made a lot of things about my life suddenly make sense. I'd always been worried about things and used to panic if something went off schedule, or I was late for something, or behind on my work. Just talking about it though has really helped me deal with it without medication, and mentally I'm way less stressed now. So I've teamed up with BetterHelp, who are the paid partner of today's video, to bring you this brilliant deal with their online therapy sessions. Now, regardless if you have a clinical mental health issue like depression or anxiety, or you just have some things that you need to unpack, therapy can give you the tools to approach your life in a very different way. BetterHelp easily helps you find a therapist, and it can match you with a therapist quickly. Working online through an app, it allows sessions to be remote and means that you can balance it around your life. Signing up is easy as well, and you can get matched with a therapist in just a couple of days. They also easily allow you to change your therapist if you don't feel like things are working out, so you can find the perfect one that's the right fit for you. At no additional cost, you can swap your therapist as well and go with someone else if you feel like you've gained all you can. If you've ever been curious about taking therapy in general, or have used it in the past, then this is the perfect opportunity to pick it up and see if it can change your life. Again, just go to betterhelp.com/heavyspoilers and get 10% off your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/heavyspoilers for 10% off. Huge thank you to BetterHelp for supporting this channel as well, and thanks to everyone who checks out the deal. Cheers. Now, Kane's series isn't the definitive take on the Backrooms, and many online creators have their own spin on the concept. There's lots of different levels and monsters, but his series is the most popular, and it leans way further into sci-fi than horror. Obviously, it can still be scary, but it's more of a cosmic horror based on fear of the unknown and the insignificance of oneself in comparison to the endless complex, which is how Async refers to the Backrooms. But in his 22 total episodes, he demonstrated a great talent in not only Blender, but storytelling and filmmaking in general. And when you're getting 250 million views across the board, you know, you're gonna get some eyeballs on you, and A24 quickly got involved. In 2023, the feature was announced with a 17-year-old Kane attached to direct. As a CGI artist predominantly, he was inexperienced in many aspects of directing, and has admitted in interviews that he was very nervous to take on the project. However, he knows his universe inside and out and knew exactly what he wanted to do with it. He said when it came to the film, dealing with actors, cinematographer and set designers, that it all came naturally, which is absolutely insane when you think about his age. Now, though the screenplay was put in development at mid-2023, the writer's strikes impacted it. However, it was completed in 2025, by which point it was credited to Parsons and also Will Sudik. Casting occurred in the summer of 2025, with Chiwetel Ejiofor and Renate Renzive signing on as leads. It was shot in Vancouver soon after, and the production had a very quick turnaround. It was released less than a year later, and that's absolutely mental when you think about how long some movies take to make these days. Now, Kane has described the movie as an episode of his Backrooms series, but asserts that that isn't required viewing and that the movie stands on its own. There are of course links to the wider narrative, but for the most part it's a smaller scale story using the complex to explore the lives of the two core characters. It also goes into their histories, patterns, and whether they succumb to their past or manage to grow beyond it. For the record as well, we are mainly going to be talking about the movie in this breakdown. We'll obviously point out the references to the web series as they relate to the film, but it's incredibly dense and we're not experts on the wider lore, so if you're looking for a breakdown on some of the other aspects, then I highly recommend this video by Seas World. There's also an excellent one by Wendigoon as well, and right after this video, you have my permission to go and watch them. But if you leave this one, I'll find you and kill you. In a nice way. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up. Anyway, we begin with the A24 logo, which has been styled to look like an old CRT monitor. This is the style that they add over the logos, and it instantly sets the tone for the film. It's from here that we then travel to a found footage segment reminiscent of the web series. While much of the film is shot with traditional narrative filmmaking, the core of the series was built on found footage. It's a genre that's kind of been done to death, especially after the Blair Witch Project, but I think they use it to great effect here. Not only does it take fans back to the thing that got the series started in the first place, but it also adds to the idea that we're looking at a relic of the past. In general, the POV shots lend themselves well to the concept because you get to explore the backrooms with the characters. You're totally locked to their perspective and never have more information than they do. Every turn around a corner has this built-in tension because, yeah, you never know what's going to be around the other side. We then see the Async logo and a title card used by the company to log their exploration. We see the text, KLWNA-SVY, and I'm pulled that off in one. But this is the label of this specific survey. It's their 446th recording and is conducted by N. Warren. He's listed as Naren Warren in the credits and is played by Evan Jogia, who actually played Leon Kennedy in the incredible Resident Evil movie from 2021. That everyone absolutely loves, including me. Best movie ever! We then see that the date of the recording is June 19th, 1990. The web series shows a ton of activity by Async in the first half of the 1990s, but by the midpoint of the decade, they seem to have abandoned their research. Though it's unclear exactly why that is, it could be something that they flesh out in a sequel. However, this date is interesting as well, as the recording takes place around 10 days before the main events of the film. Despite this, we do witness some things that shouldn't really be in the back rooms around this time. I'll talk about them more later on in the video, but I do have a theory about why Pirate Clock is here. Theory time, you son of a bitch. Now, though you are led to believe that Pirate Clock is there because of Clark, I think him being here now could disprove that. The movie does kind of make it seem that it's only once you enter the back rooms that the world starts to fill with your thoughts and trauma. However, Pirate Clock is here before Clark ever steps foot in it. I actually think that Pirate Clock is there because of Phil. Jumping ahead a bit, he's the async worker who we learn has visited the back room several times. Because of this, he's someone whose mind is likely filling the void. Personally, I think that he saw Clark's advert on TV before, and this sunk into his subconsciousness as being something strange. This could be like how we have the guy with a lampshade later on, and also the guy with a beard who we don't ever meet outside. We've all had dreams though, where we've seen something minor during the day that we haven't really thought about, and then the next thing you know, you're getting killed by a white dog wearing a polo shirt. In your dreams, obviously. But because of that, I think he witnessed some pirate guy on TV who had a backdrop similar to the backrooms. His mind then filled in this space, and that's how Pirate Clock was created. Time clearly works differently, and when we see the mural later on, you might also notice that the figure being fed to Pirate Clock has something in their hand. This looks a lot like the clothes stand that Mary later beats it with, so potentially there's just lots of timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly stuff. This is also added by the fact that we have the no credit sign and beach image there from the start. This beach image appears at the end, though it's stretched out and distorted. So yeah, I think that's how Pirate Clock actually got here before, but there's another theory that we'll touch upon later, but that's in the theory top. I'll not do the thing again. I won't put you through that again. Anyway, as Naren makes his way through the world, we instantly get the impression that something's already off. Naren's already checking his corners, breathing heavily and quickly moving through open areas of the complex. We then get the impression that this is no longer just a routine survey and that he's fearful that something's finding him, which is of course Pirate Clock. He then picks up the blue duffel bag, which is found by Clark later on, and begins moving through the corridors. A trail of wires then leads him to his research station where he barricades an entrance behind him. He then attempts to make radio contact with Async, but is completely unsuccessful. He then explains that he lost the signal of his survey group, and in the episode series titled Informational Video, we learn that Async employers are advised against entering the complex alone. They must travel in at least groups of 3, and in the same episode, researcher Peter Tench stepped away from the group and then witnessed them disappearing. Heading straight back to Async, he discovered he'd been missing for months and had actually traveled through time. So it is possible that Naren has experienced something similar. I'll talk about how this could link to Mary's mother Nora later on, but it's quite an interesting idea. He also claims to have witnessed some form of entity, though he didn't get a look at it. And spoiler alert, it's Pirate Clock. He then hears something and a seagull flies through the room. This seemingly ended up in the complex via an unknown threshold, or null zone as they're referred to by Async. These can appear anywhere like the basement of a furniture store, a highway, or even the sky. Personally, I think that these are likely linked to the text file that was released which talks about trash being dumped in the Fremont parking lot. This is said to have attracted every seagull from the bay, and they may unwittingly be flying through a barrier. Later on, when Mary goes to the store, we do see her entering a car park and the seagulls then fly up from the ground, and we then get a shot of a homeless man with them moving overhead, very much linking them that way. The seagull is also the first example we see of the nautical motif that reappears throughout the movie. The seagulls, pirate-themed objects, pictures of beaches, and they're all stuff that's associated with oceans and seas. I feel that they're all in place because Kane himself has likened the back rooms to the ocean on several occasions.
Like needing to cross an ocean, needing to, again, like look around a corner, needing to, just go too far sometimes. I think it's something that's very much baked into every human being.
They're both seemingly endless frontiers that contain far more than we know. We've only mapped out a small percentage of the ocean floor, and the vast majority of it's unexplored. But perhaps more relevant to the film is the ocean as a metaphor for memory. In the episode of the series I Remember, a narrator talks about a manor by the seashore that was swallowed by the ocean with all the other forgotten things. Throughout the film, the complex is explained as a manifestation of memory and something that's like a photocopy of a photocopy. Things are remembered again and again, and this happens until their forms are distorted and they become completely unrecognizable. This is seen most notably in the moment where we move through the copies of the floor of Mary's house and they become less and less like the original. Known as generation loss, this phenomenon occurs when you try and duplicate something, but the information isn't able to be copied across perfectly. So the next iteration is missing that, and then copying that causes more information to get lost. Over time, things can look completely differently and enter the uncanny. The ocean idea also explains why Kane decided on Clark's pirate theme. Just like how sailors traverse the sea, he inhabits the backrooms, unable to move on from the past until he's consumed by it. Anyway, Naren moves on and starts seeing things from Clark's store. We see his pirate wheel, which is evocative of the KV-31 prototype in the series. This was the first version of the machine that eventually granted Asing access to the complex, and it's sort of similar to how a ship's helm enables nautical travel. There's also the aforementioned no credit sign. Like the stop sign we see later on, any text generated by the backrooms is mirrored, which speaks to how the complex recalls objects and places them without understanding them. It reminds me a lot of the early iterations of AI art and how they were unable to fully duplicate text and faces. He then sees a door open behind him. The sound of it creaking is actually from the game Portal, which Kane has credited as being a big source of inspiration. A hulking, shadowy figure then emerges, and you can see that it has a peg leg and hat. It then chases him to a room, and we assume it's killed the character. Now, due to these objects appearing later in the story, I did also wonder if Naren was transported forward in time to where these items are present. The footage then cuts out, and we see it's been recovered by Async. In the reflection of the TV screen, we see three researchers, one of which is Clyde, who appears throughout the web series and is portrayed by Kane Parsons' father Michael. We then have the title card, and the letters double up and overlap in a way that's visually reminiscent to the design of the still lifes. They're like the text itself, and they've been misremembered by the complex, which plays into the idea of duality. Twos and doubles appear throughout, with us getting the still life that mimics the character, the two handprints, the Ottoman Empire and pirate themes, the ground floor of the store and basement, and much, much more. Hell, even the therapy roleplay session is played out twice, with it happening in the real world and then later in the backrooms. We then transition to concrete and meet Mary. Alongside her mother, she's pressing her hand into it outside their house. This is a way to preserve a memory of them first coming here when the concrete was still wet. So I imagine this is likely when they moved in. Like the memory, this also leaves an imprint, which is similar to how the backrooms remember. We learn throughout the film that her mother Nora suffered from mental illness and was a hoarder who kept Mary indoors to protect her. Given that this moment takes place outside as well, we can assume that the memory takes place before that, and is quite a happy one that Mary holds on to. Literally. In our questions and answers video, we also talked about how we think Nora may have gone to the backrooms. When we see parts of Mary's childhood, we learn she believed that outsiders were coming to get her. Thus she kept her and Mary locked up for years, with the doors blocked with furniture akin to how it's piled on top of each other in the backrooms. Nora was eventually committed, and the house was knocked down by what could be perceived as outsiders. Mary then kept this handprint, which links in the idea of an impression of the past. I did wonder if the backrooms is also what broke Nora's mind, and the still lifes could explain why she's scared of people. In the expanded lore, the character Peter was driven insane wandering them, and Nora could be another victim of that. Even the fact the sky looks fake here did make me think that that might have been the case. This moment is then interrupted by a wrecking crew who are destroying her childhood home to make way for a new apartment building. It's very much them burying the past, which further ties into the idea of memory. We then cut to her present self watching as they do this and get a close-up of the handprints. Carrying this, she's taking a piece of the past with her that she literally has to let go of to escape the traumatic events in the backrooms. The apartment block sign behind her could also explain why an apartment building-like structure ends up in the backrooms later. We then hear a segment of her book, The Window Within.
We all have our loops, our habits, behaviors that keep us walking in circles. A path you made. It's the one that kept you safe when you were a child.
Now this is one of the film's central ideas. Our memories inform our present behaviour and keep us trapped in patterns that we must grow beyond. The characters are trapped in cycles that hold them back, and Clark's consumed by rage from his divorce, whereas Mary's consumed by the need to help others. Her mother's illness weighs heavily on her shoulders, and she's become a therapist to try and make up for not being able to help her. As we hear the book passage, we're then introduced to Clark in his furniture store, Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire.
Dude, I still don't get it. Are you like a pirate or a sultan? Just be good to establish these things.
Yeah, I don't get it either, mate. But we do see the mascot holding two swords, and yeah, it's pointed out in the film that these two themes don't really go together. This points to how the complex itself also doesn't make sense. It's simply just stitching spaces together without context. Additionally, we've already discussed how the ocean's symbolic of the backrooms, with Clark traversing the complex, which itself is full of furniture. So the backrooms are quite literally Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire. And it's a bit of a reach that. As he approaches the store, we then see some graffiti on the window saying rip-off. We later learn that Clark's struggling to juggle his finances, so he likely upsells his furniture to cover the costs. However, this also plays upon the idea that the backrooms are a rip-off of the real world. If you rip something off, you copy it, and it's just a nice bit of subtle foreshadowing. Inside the store, we then see a mannequin resembling the pirate Clark entity and the ship wheel we saw earlier. We'll discuss this more in detail later on, but it's definitely notable how the monster is a warped version of a corporate mascot. We then see Clark's drawings of building designs, followed by overdue bills, which nicely sets up that he had to abandon his architectural career to support his wife through law school. The buildings themselves are also warped and a bit strange looking, much like the backrooms themselves. Now, I think it's sad because the backrooms could provide infinite possibilities for a man with a big imagination, but Clark's unable to capitalize on it, and he just blames others. We then hear the line,
You learned to push people away before they could hurt you. And now, as an adult, you're still stuck right where you started. Alone.
Now this is Clark's loop. We learn throughout that he has a big chip on his shoulder and that he thinks everyone else is the cause of his issues as opposed to himself. He pushes away sources of criticism because it makes him feel inferior and he ends up by himself.
I hurt people. I don't want to, it's just the way I'm wired, so maybe I deserve to be alone.
Through lines like this, we see how Clark simultaneously accepts responsibility but also refuses accountability. He admits that he hurt his wife but pawns it off on his innate character instead of his behavioral choices. He repeats this sentiment later in the dinner scene and there refuses to change. This is ultimately why he's killed by a version of himself, because he refuses to change who he is and that inner self consumes him. Mary then proposes they do a roleplay exercise, reenacting the night that Clark's wife left him. She plays the role of Barbara, and Clark is hesitant to do so, but she insists this, and it's later flipped when Clark forces her to play the role. He reframes her leaving him as the night she kicked him out of his own house, which bitterly reframes him as the victim as opposed to the likely alternative. As we learn, he got home late, drunk, waked Barbara up, and then ended up breaking a glass. They then recreate the scene with Clark constantly reasserting that the behaviour wasn't his fault. He's home late because he had to wind down with alcohol after a hard day's work and says that if she wants a family, then someone has to work.
Who do you think pays for everything while you're gallivanting around campus like a 30-year-old freshman?
Now, whether what he says is true or not doesn't really matter. He's undoubtedly made sacrifices, as people do in relationships, but he removes his own agency from the equation. He continually makes a martyr out of himself and reframes things as happening to him instead of choices that he made with his partner. He then explodes with rage when questioned.
Just because you didn't get to be an architect doesn't...
I am a fucking architect!
It shows how his rage is actually wrapped up in feelings of inadequacy. He even has to constantly reassure her that this is his house, as he's the one paying for it. This moment also implies that he gets angry when he's unable to accept his own shortcomings. Out of character, he then apologizes to Mary for getting worked up, and she says,
That's the purpose of the whole exercise. This is a good start. To feel what you feel, and then learn to identify a new path.
It's the last part he struggles with, and when repeating the exercise later in the dinner scene, he makes her say that he doesn't have to change. We then cut to Clark filming a commercial for the store with his employees Bobby and Kat. Dressed up as Captain Clark, he hobbles around with a fake peg leg, talking about their great prices, which is at odds with the graffiti we saw earlier. The chair he's sitting in then breaks, and it definitely speaks to the quality of his product, but when Bobby keeps filming, Clark says,
Mark, you good?
Turn the camera!
No, it's good. It's outtake stuff, dude.
Turn the fucking camera!
Despite Bobby saying it's a good outtake, Clark can't bear for this to be recorded because it paints him as lesser. This is something that haunts him in the backrooms as well, and we see this broken chair highlighting his failure. This moment clearly stuck with the character, as Bobby's shirt also appears there in Pirate Clark's lair. So what others see as being just a funny mishap, he sees as this big embarrassing moment, and it's another traumatic thing that takes shape later on. As he scrambles to take off his peg leg, they then ask if he needs help, but he dismisses the offer, seeing the need for help as weakness. He then tells Kat to open the stores, but she says it already is, and we get a wide shot of the place, and it just looks completely empty. It plays into his isolation and just furthers the stuff from earlier about how the store is failing. Clark's lost his wife in Korea, and all he has to show for it's a failing furniture store where he has to prance about dressed up like a pirate. Now, potentially, he'd feel better about himself if the business was successful, but I do also doubt it. He dreamed of being an architect who builds spaces, and now the best he can hope for is filling them with crappy furniture. He then asks Kat to clean up the mess while he goes to sulk in his office. It's just a small moment, but it definitely hints at how he likes to hold power over people. There's more examples that are laced throughout the movie, from him taking the pair to explore the complex to the dinner scene with Mary, but he seems to cope with this inferiority by wielding dominance over others. Inside his office, Clark then looks over some paperwork and the electrician arrives. Also, love the set design here as well, as the odd shape of the room is not only reminiscent of the Backrooms, but it also reflects how he's been painted into a corner. The bills are piling up, Guy's just losing money, and yeah, just having him shot like this, very, very symbolic. We then learn that the meter itself is fine, but Clark is still being charged high electricity bills and also experiencing power outages. So something else is using up the power and tripping the system. In the episode of the web series Lighting and Tile Survey, we watch some async researchers as they inspect the wiring in the complex drop ceiling. Perhaps the most confusing thing is that there's also nothing out the ordinary about them, and they work like any other electrical system. So it is possible that the Backrooms actually siphon power from the real world through null zones. We then see the circuit breaker has some additional switches that seemingly do nothing. They're sloppily installed, and the electrician says whoever installed it was a complete idiot, which I did find funny, as that's pretty much what every single workman says about the previous guy. The film doesn't really linger on this though, but the weird switches are basically exactly how the complex remembers objects without understanding how they work. It heavily suggests that the Backrooms influence goes two ways, and that the real world can be affected by the complex. Its implications are massive as well, and though this is just a tiny example of the Backrooms changing the real world, it does suggest it could do so in more significant ways. In the episode of the series Found Footage 3, the character Ravi discovers a weird corridor in the basement of a house which takes him to the complex. That takes place 5 years after the events of the movie, so it is possible that the Backrooms influence becomes greater over time. It's actually quite Lovecraftian as well, and evokes the idea of how when you look into the abyss gazes back. Fucked up that saying, but you know what I mean. They then flick it back and forth, but nothing seems to happen. Clark then calls to Kat to ask if anything's going on, but all she says is that the rat is back, and that she thought they killed the rat. Clark then says,
We killed a rat.
and it really hammers home just how pathetic his life is. Mine's pretty pathetic at the moment as well, because I'm dressed up like a pirate, but instead of wearing this, I could be wearing our brand new Backrooms inspired shirt at the merch store below. We've got this fantastic design, perfect for the film, backwards text like that, that's really creative that, mate. I'll let Sheridan know you said that. We've got our Obsession one as well, lots of discounts, and it all helps videos like this get made, so go and pick one up because you'll look better than I do, if that's even possible. A ceiling light flickers, and we then transition to a commercial for Mary's book.
Do you ever feel like you're living behind glass, watching life happen, but never really stepping into it? Maybe it's time to open the window.
This is a motif that reappears throughout the film, and it stems from Mary's childhood where her mother kept her locked indoors. Her only way of viewing the world was through the window, and whenever she did, Nora shut the curtains. It represents the ways in which fear and trauma keep you trapped in the past and create barriers between you and your life. You can view the world, but only through the windows of your past experiences, so the book encourages you to open the window and simply move on. Now, metaphorically, both Mary and Clark are living behind glass, unable to move on from their baggage. The similarities between them are emphasized by the fact that they both have commercials and their general lonely lifestyle. Mary sits at home watching TV with a concrete handprint beside her. We then cut to Clark watching TV in bed as well, with a photo of Barbara on his bedside table. Both are symbols of how they cling to the past. The fact they're watching TV is also very notable. Screens act as windows through which you can experience life without actually living it. There's a degree of separation between you and the world around you, but not you, mate. You keep watching the video. and give it a like while you're there. Despite the similarities though, Clark's life is a bit more pathetic. He's drinking in bed, and when the TV power cuts out, he sees himself reflected on the screen. It reminds me a lot of like if you've ever played like a video game for 3 hours and then the screen goes black between levels and you just see yourself sitting there, pathetic and alone, dead inside. He then turns on the lights and we see that he's sleeping in the store. We also see that he's got a t-shirt on for the Modernist Design Forum from 1970. Even though this t-shirt is 20 years old at this time, he still holds on to it because of what it represents. He then looks over to the photo of Barbara and we can see that she has red hair. This is an important detail and it's another that helps to confirm the theory that the lady in red is a representation of Barbara. When doing the roleplay with Mary, Clark cuts off her scalp, and this is so Mary can be more like his wife. That scene also takes place in a recreation of his home, and when Pirate Clark enters, she tries to run out the room. The still life then gets stuck in the corner, but she fears this version of Clark because of what happened in the real world. There's also an open bottle of whiskey behind the photo as well, highlighting how alcohol always hung over the relationship. Unable to sleep, he then heads out listening to Mary's audiobook in the car.
Your consciousness is a room full of memories that is constantly evolving.
When you recall something, you believe you're doing it perfectly, but each time you're remembering something slightly different. You're not actually remembering the events, you're remembering them as they were the last time you remembered them. This is also very similar how the complex works. Like a photocopy, each iteration experiences generation loss, and the details of its room and objects become fuzzy. He then talks about how as you move through life, the untrained mind can begin to build walls, vocalizing the window/barrier metaphor we mentioned earlier. Clark then pulls up outside of a house and looks through a window. Now, it's not confirmed one way or the other, but we can assume that this is the house that Barbara kicked him out of. The one he's still paying for! This makes him a nice juxtaposition of Mary though, as he's looking in on the window while she's looking out. It's also an inversion of what the audiobook's advising. Instead of opening the window and moving on with your life, Clark literally looks through the window into his past, utterly consumed by it. This paints the pair as opposites as well. Clark is someone whose trauma is tied to him trying to get back through the window, whereas Mary was about trying to get out. Both have a figure in their life that's caused this situation, and they're represented by a wife and mother. However, Clark blames his wife rather than accepting responsibility, whereas Mary blames herself because she couldn't help her mum. Mary was locked in, whereas Clark was forced out of the house, and it's such a good way to show how the pair differ. There's also an interesting theory time about this moment, with lots of fans suggesting that Clark actually entered the house and killed his wife after this moment. Sounds crazy at this point in the film, but with everything we later learn about Clark, I don't know if it seems that outlandish. The complex brings out a side of him that we weren't introduced to previously. He violently assaults Mary and even seems to have killed Kat due to the head in the fridge. He also scalps the Barbara still life and makes Mary say he doesn't need to change. It's stuff like that that's made people think he wasn't necessarily corrupted by the backrooms and that they merely allowed him to be who he always was. Furthermore, as we push in on the window to Barbara's bedroom, the audiobook is literally discussing how you have to open the window and leave the past behind. Shortly after this, we even see Clark drawing buildings again, which could suggest how after killing Barbara, he's trying to return to his architectural career. It's an interesting theory, and whether you subscribe to it or not, I do think it's worth bringing up. I have to say though, they don't mention her death at all in the film, so I do think this theory might be pulled out of thin air. But look, I've had my own outlandish theories before as well. I will not hold it against you. Theory time away. I had the theory time of my life. Nonetheless, we get a montage of Clark and Mary's days as they go through life unable to break through their barriers. We see him stuck working at the furniture store, sketching buildings, and it's so dead everyone's just sitting about doing other things. We also see Mary at a party and she gets triggered by a mother and daughter. She then steps away to take some pills, which mirrors how Clark self-medicates with alcohol. We then cut back to the store and see the stop sign that appears in the back room. Once more drinking in bed, Clark then sees an advert for a competitor, and that is Big Wayne's Furniture Barn. And this video is sponsored by Big Wayne's Furniture Barn. Yeehaw! Get yourself down. Use my code in the description. No, but I love how these places all need a bit of a gimmick to sell. I hate people who dress up in costumes and have gimmicks, those sons of a bitches. Big Wayne is clearly doing well for himself though, as his advert seems to have a much higher budget than Clark's. The TV then cuts out and patches into a feed from the complex. This is from the same async security camera that Clark later approaches, and it appearing here is another example of the Backrooms influence leaking into the real world. He's perplexed by it before it cuts off, and then he gives the TV a smack for good measure. Because kids, that is how you fixed a telly in the 90s. He then notices a flickering light coming from the basement.
Fuck! Piece of shit!
Sounded like me talking about Colton Ogburn there, but we see that the rage bubbles up again once more when he feels like he's not in control. He then flicks every light switch on the circuit, but the light remains on. This is until he flicks the strange one and the place goes dark. Going upstairs, he then notices a slither of light coming from the basement wall. I love this effect as well, and how it appears and disappears depending on the angle. Clark's then drawn in, and at this point he steps into the back rooms. Now though this place is seen as somewhere bad, I actually think the back rooms is quite nice. It's quite a nice place, that. It's very chill. There's nothing bad there per se. It's more about the people who come in there that bring the bad with them. You are the one who fills it with your demons, but the back rooms itself isn't evil on its own. Reminds me a lot of places like Silent Hill and how it's more a manifestation of trauma. Certain people can navigate it without seeing anything bad. It's more about what you bring into it. In the center of the room's also a pile of furniture generated by what's in Clark's. Instead of being laid out neatly though, they're messily stacked in the center because the back rooms lacks the context of the real world. Clark even inspects what seems to be a stack of 2 chairs, but they're actually one object joined together. Almost as if the complex has misinterpreted 2 stacked objects as one. Now sadly, he hasn't discovered an infinite furniture glitch and can't just restock the store with all this stuff, which would have been a great business plan. But this is clearly drawing him in, and thus he goes deeper into the complex. This is actually a proper set, and though the web series was made in Blender, they went all out here with a relocation. However, they did still take advantage of Kane's Blender skills while making it. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Parsons said, "I was working in Blender, modeling the sets, and then we would literally go and build them in real time. The set was huge. We built 30,000 square feet of actual backrooms that we could walk around in. Actually, some people were getting lost. It felt like being there, which was really weird." I think just having an enclosed set though was great for the production, and it allowed the DOP Jeremy Cox to have unrestricted freedom to shoot the film how he wanted. We also hear the incredibly eerie score composed by Ido van Bremen. This was alongside Parsons himself, who wrote all the music for the web series. The entire section is baked in atmosphere as Clark slowly makes his way through the corridors and rooms. There's really bright ones, but really dark ones as well, and you just don't know what's around the corner. I love how he completely ignores the stop sign as well. And a bit of advice, guys, if you ever find yourself in a horror movie and see a big sign that says stop, turn around and go. I know it's backwards, but you see that? Bail. The dead seagull is also a clear warning sign as well, but Clark presses on forward. This is towards some voices, and we can hear that they're speaking in different languages. Coming across the caveman cutout, we see more of these cutouts throughout the movie. They came from the web series Found Footage 3, and though viewers were left confused there, the movie does give us a bit of an explanation about their existence. They seem to be left around the complex by Async as bait to lure both entities and trapped humans towards security cameras. As we later see, Mary knocks one over and sets off gas that pacifies Pirate Clark, who's then seen being studied by Async. Now the voices themselves do sound a bit weird, but this is actually playing audio from the Voyager Golden Record. This was fired into space with the hopes it would be like a message in a bottle that might be found by some advanced alien race. This could also build up the ocean themes and show how Async were doing something similar. The disc itself contained greetings in 55 languages, and it was intended to make contact with other life forms, much like we see here. Clark then follows the wire into a room, and we see a security camera on the wall. Later on, we see this time stamped as June 29, 1990, confirming we're 10 days after Naren recording at the start. It also features the same logging text we saw at the start of the found footage, so we can assume this is the same general area. The cables then lead through a locked door, and though we never find out what's on the other side, I do imagine that it's some sort of research outpost like the one that Naren found earlier. He then discovers Naren's bag with his ID and some of the discs and tapes. This raises some questions as well, as we know Naren was carrying this bag when he was killed by Pirate Clark. So how has the bag ended up here? Well, I'll tell you my theory, and we'll see if you agree. So we know that his footage was recovered, given that we saw async researchers watching it at the start. This means they likely recovered the bag too and stashed it in this cubby for safekeeping. Some have even suggested that this is a sort of drop-off point where researchers in the field can stash their recordings to be taken back to async. There's also a nod to Ivan Beck with this, which could set him up for appearing in the sequel. Now, casting all that aside, given the fact that it's Naren's bag, I find it much more likely that this is them hiding evidence of their dead employee. We see that in the web series, Async go to great lengths to hide the truth of what happened to Peter. They even forge death certificates and likely plan to kill him once he returns, so I don't think it's out the question that something shady's going on here. It's also possible that Naren left it here himself and is yet to retrieve it. If he did experience a time skip that separated him from his group, it's entirely possible that he could come back and get it and then be killed by Pirate Clock. This doesn't explain though why the seagull Clock saw's already dead, but it's possible multiple birds have found their way into the complex. Now I do lean towards Naren already being dead at this point though, with his possessions being recovered somewhere nearby. This is because of the dead seagull and the proximity to the furniture store. If Pirate Clock was created by the complex before Clock ever entered it, it's not unreasonable to imagine it was in this area. So perhaps the Caveman and Voyager audio has been set up here to lure out Pirate Clock specifically. Anyway, the crawl space opens out on the other side where Clock finds the complex's recreation of the commercial. The shoes are the same ones that Bobby and Cat wore, and we have the lopsided chair we mentioned earlier. Now, though the design is the same, the chair's a lot bigger. Some have even suggested that this is Pirate Clock's throne room, with him potentially being created here. He of course dressed identical to how Clock was when shooting the ad, and that moment was deeply embarrassing for him. Since Pirate Clock seems to be the embodiment of Clock's raging inferiority complex, I could easily see that being the moment of his creation. There's also a hole full of furniture and a weird slope up to another doorway. This seems to be the backroom's interpretation of a corridor, and it clearly misunderstands the perspective and makes it a slope instead. Pirate Clock then attacks, and Clock escapes through a small door at the top of the slope, which is such a good scene. I think the film just bombards you with emptiness, so when something actually happens, it feels far more intense. Clock then ends up back where he started and then grabs a chair to prove the experience was real. We then cut to Async and see Phil watching back the security footage of Clock in the complex. Now, a directorial choice I love is that after Clock's trip to the complex, even the real world starts to look uncanny. There's a high angle shot from the top of a hill where the warp perspective of the town below looks like it's above. There's also a row of houses where the architecture overlaps in a way reminiscent of the backrooms. There's also a mess of cables connected to a power line, and though it's pretty normal stuff, it seems strange after being in the complex. This mirrors the way Clark's outlook has changed since entering and touches upon how when you gaze into the abyss gazes back. We then catch up with him and Mary in another therapy session, however this time he seems more erratic and unhinged. She asks if he's intoxicated right now, but he says he hasn't had a drink since Friday. This was the one we saw him drinking before entering the complex, and it shows that it's actually been a few days since we last saw him. Otherwise he would have just said yesterday. He then asks,
"You have a 5150, someone?"
This is, a section of the California Welfare and Institutions Code authorizing law enforcement and mental health professionals to detain an individual experiencing a mental health crisis if they pose a danger to themselves or others. It's probably a very unnerving question for a therapist to hear though, and it suggests to her that Clark might be losing his grip. To be fair though, I'm not sure how sane I'd appear either if I stumbled across the backrooms. He then tries to explain it to her, and we get this fantastic line.
Imagine describing a dog to someone who's never seen one before and then asking them to draw it. They might get some things right, but there's no way they'd get everything right.
This builds on what we've been saying about the backrooms lacking vital context for what it generates. Because you don't know the full context, your brain kind of melds and fills in things for how you think it should look. Brains are where we of course store our thoughts and memories, and these are the things that fill up the complex. Beyond that, it gives us a direct tie to Async. We later learn that they began developing MRI machines, and an MRI machine can take a photo of the brain, and the invention of this has saved countless lives. No more drilling into people's heads to see their brain and get the demons out. Yay! But I wish they'd do it to me. But the photo taken by an MRI is also something that doesn't give the full picture. It takes the image of what your brain itself looks like, but it also doesn't fill in what the person's thinking, what they're like, and also their memories. It lacks the full context, and it just copies your brain, much like this place copies your thoughts. Async got into this because they were exploring magnetic fields, and I know I keep banging on how I'm a watch guy every single fucking video, but watches, when they're advertising stuff, They'll often advertise anti-magnetic stuff. They always go like, oh, this watch is so anti-magnetic, you could wear it in an MRI machine and it would be fine. But don't take your watch into an MRI machine, mate. Don't be a fucking idiot. But I did think that in studying that async might have broke through a field in reality. We all have magnetic fields around us, and if you can pass through that, you could potentially open up these doorways. Now in the law, this is known as Project KV-31, which happened in 1988. This has been linked to a real-life earthquake that happened in Santa Cruz at the time. We also see a small switch in Clark's behavior at this point when he thinks she isn't taking him seriously.
Details. So from a distance, you look at it, you think you're seeing a dog, but then you look closer. Why are you looking at me?
I think it's interesting here that Mary doesn't even interrupt Clark, and she hasn't called him crazy or questioned his story, but he reacts to a perceived judgment because he's so focused on how he appears to others. This again is a display of his loop, and whenever he perceives dismissal, he lashes out and pushes people away. He then starts to explain things, but she clearly doesn't know what he's rambling about, and it's like trying to imagine a dog without ever seeing one. I got you there, you son of a bitch, I got that line in. She then asserts that she's just trying to understand and asks if he's seen any people in the complex.
Not that I've seen. You know, I hear there's footsteps and stuff gets moved around when I'm not.
Now what's interesting here is that he talks about it in the present tense. He doesn't talk about it like it's a place he's been to once, but somewhere he's actively visiting. Combining this with the fact it's been a few days since we last saw him leads us to believe he spent a lot more time than we initially assume. It also marks a subtle shift in which Clark stops being a reliable narrator as he knows things about the complex that we don't, and this becomes increasingly relevant as the film goes on. We then learn he's been mapping the place out, adding to the idea of explorers charting new frontiers. It's difficult to make out at this point, but luckily this was released as promotional material by A24, so we can get a good look at what he's drawn and the things he's seen so far. There's a few things that jump out on a first glance, and you might notice the top half of the map has the text upside down. The bottom half has it the right way up, and this somewhat creates the idea of a mirror, which plays into the ideas of duality. We can also see he's described the commercial room as the throne room, which adds to the theory of it being Pirate Clark's birthplace. The fact that both Kane and Clark describe it as such also implies that it's associated with great power. There's also a spot labelled steep ramp with a large question mark in an empty space nearby. This is where he takes Kat and Bobby to investigate next, and not far from that is a dead end with old bottles written above it. Old bottles.
Oh, wow!
Now, I'm not entirely sure what this could be other than somehow linking to Clark's alcohol problem. It is an empty bottle later on in the film that we'll talk about, and on the top right, it just says pool. The complex actually contains multiple pool rooms throughout the movie and web series, and at the bottom right, we can also see green something. This call actually holds a lot of significance in Kane's Backrooms lore, which we'll discuss in more detail later with Mary. Shabauk, stay around until the end of the video, you son of a bitch. Nonetheless, it's an extremely detailed map and shows just how much time Clark spent in the complex. She asks why nobody else has found it if it's so big, and he responds that it's because it's subterraneous and not on any maps that anyone would think to look at. This shows that despite the fact he's been spending time there, he's not really understanding it yet, and hasn't realised he's been travelling into an extra-dimensional space. It's at this point that Mary properly starts to exhibit doubt, and begins to say that because he's not had a drink since Friday, he might have imagined it as like some sort of withdrawal symptom. And we've all been there wandering home, half cut or drunk on a night out, and just went into a massive infinite space, full of trauma that never leaves us. This hat's so tight. He doesn't let her finish though, and immediately gets up and leaves. Again, this is Clark's loop coming into play as he withdraws whenever his legitimacy is doubted. Before he goes, he also assures her that he's going to return with proof and that she'll owe him an apology. The lengths he'll go to get this proof as well is also very interesting, and it kind of plays into his self-image preservation. I do think there's something else going on here as well, which we'll discuss more in detail later during that dinner scene. As he storms out, we're then left with Mary, who exhales in relief, suggesting that she'd found Clark's erratic behaviour frightening and perhaps felt threatened. She even gets up to check he's actually left and looks at the window as we hear his car drive away. This idea of looking out the window is of course very symbolic of her character, and she then looks at the concrete handprint on her desk. As we discussed, this is a symbol of her trauma, stemming from her inability to help her mentally ill mother. Its inclusion here points to the fact that despite the danger Clark may represent, she still feels an urge to help him. This is Mary's loop. She prioritizes the safety of others over that of herself, which we will see leads to almost fatal consequences for the character. So they actually juxtapose each other quite nicely. Clark then goes to Kat's house, and we can see this neighborhood at the end in the ending montage. But Kat clearly loves her boss, and it reminds me a lot of when I talk to my staff and tell them they have to edit a Backrooms video in the space of 2 hours.
Look.
What the fuck?
Taking the camera, they then go to film things deep within the backrooms. And it was only on this video I realized that Bobby was that son of a bitch from A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. But it's very interesting that Clark doesn't have friends or family to go through first. When asked by Mary at the start if he was alone, he assured her he wasn't because he had his employees. Since Barbara left him though, he doesn't have a single equal relationship. Each one he's left with has this built-in power dynamic, as Mary holds power over him as a therapist, and he holds power over Kat and Bobby. Equal relationships require a degree of vulnerability and compromise, and these are things that Clark just isn't comfortable with. Instead, he resorts to structured relationships with clear and predictable dynamics. Doctor and patient, employee and employee, amazing YouTuber, best YouTuber on earth, and viewer, who I rely on for everything and must keep my self-image perfect for. Who is in control in this relationship? Is it me making the videos that you love and are entertained by, or am I reliant on you to watch said videos so I can keep making videos? It's very symbiotic, and yeah, there's lots of things in life where there's an equal partnership, but Clark just doesn't have that. He then offers them overtime, and they agree to help him out the next day with his research. Now, one take is that the film is a commentary on capitalism. The backrooms are modelled after empty office buildings, and in the series, acing picture to sell housing and storage space. Clark's main issues also stem from him needing money. His wife wanted to start a family and go to law school, but neither are possible without that sweet, sweet cash. Clark also made sacrifices regarding his career and instead opened up the furniture store. This was less fulfilling, built resentment, and ultimately destroyed his marriage. After this, he replaced the connection with his employees. When Mary asks if he's alone, he says he can't be alone because of Kat and Bobby, but then even exploits them and puts them at risk by taking them to the backrooms. The final antagonist of the movie is of course Pirate Clark, who's a warped version of a corporate mascot, and he ends up consuming his staff along with Clark. Eva Mary's home is destroyed to make way for a block of flats, which is no doubt built to generate money. Async are also likely doing things for profit. In the expanded lore, they say they're doing things to help people and exploring the backrooms as a way to advance humanity. Now, I suppose you could argue that, but their plans are also based around building things that they can then sell to the public. This idea of profit dressed up as charity could even be why they made MRI machines in the first place. You know, I'm not going to slag off any company who makes an MRI machine, you know, they obviously help people, but they're making them and making money at the same time, so there might be some ulterior motives there. But for the next part of the film, we move back into the found footage stuff with Bobby as our point of view character. He documents things, asks questions, and also acts as a way that we can get another death. Clark then loads bags with supplies, and when questioned what the rope's for, Kat remarks that he's going to tie them up. It is a bit of a joke at the time, with it being used to descend down the steep ramp. However, he does tie Mary up later on, and probably kills Kat, so this very much acts as foreshadowing for his violent turn. They then question what they're doing, but Clark just says research. Now, this is also the first time that we get to see what people think of Clark without him being there. And yeah, they clearly think he's crazy. It's understandable as well that after the scene with Mary, you know, he'd want to just show them instead of explaining it. However, it becomes increasingly clear throughout this section that he's withholding vital information. One reading of this is that Clark views the pair as expendable. He views them solely as employees and therefore people he can use. The power dynamic can't be ignored here, and then Clark takes advantage of the financial power he holds to exploit them. He's aware that there's potentially something dangerous in the complex, but without knowing this, the pair are unable to make informed decisions regarding their safety and both end up dead. Whether or not he does this on purpose, he clearly prioritizes his own curiosity above their safety. He then passes through the null zone, which understandably freaks the pair out. Telling them it's fine, Bobby then goes first and eventually Kat follows. She's much more apprehensive about this section, and while Bobby's curious about what's going on, she's clearly only going along with it to keep an eye on him. We then cut to a different looking room, which reflects how in Kane's backrooms, it's not just the piss yellow office buildings that get remembered. There's also a tiled floor covered in rubble and a window to an area meant to simulate outside. There's a bunch of sun and splendor imagery, and this motif dates back to the Romans and depicts a smiling sun. It's something that appeared throughout The Wicker Man as well, and that too had something hidden beneath the surface. And there's a breakdown on the channel now. These have also appeared in the web series in Found Footage 3, where the character Ravi comes across a bunch of them while exploring the complex. Its significance hasn't been properly explained yet, but it could possibly be a reference to Kane's Splendor series that he's teased on Discord. However, generally, the sun itself plays a pivotal role in Kane's backroom lore. When developing the MRI technology, Ivan Beck was involved in an accident involving a solar flare. A solar storm then overloaded the system, and he supposedly witnessed a bright green glow, which is likely the same green light that Mary sees later. He was blinded in one eye, but experienced a vision of the backrooms, which is a play on the blind seer trope. This is where someone loses their sight, but is granted spiritual enlightenment or cosmic knowledge. He later joined Async and spent the next decade and a half trying to access the complex, which they eventually achieved in 1988. Kane has described Ivan Beck as both the protagonist and antagonist of the series, and he even receives a special thanks in the end credits. He's still a very mysterious character, and we don't really know what's going on with him, but it's clear that he's at the centre of everything. Kane has even teased a 9-part limited series that he'd like to produce, which would likely focus on Beck and conclude the entire series. Clark then ties Bobby up to lower him down the ramp. Kat argues that he doesn't have to do it, but he insists that he's curious and wants to see what's down there. It's probably like a great time for Clark to tell them that there's something strange roaming the halls, but at this point it completely slips his mind. They then tie the other end of the rope to a bed and begin lowering him in. Design-wise, it's very similar to the ramp that the character Kane's camera fell down when he was killed by the entity at the end of Found Footage 1. He eventually reaches the bottom and then finds himself in a room that appears to be on its side. There's a bunch of clothes, including the end apartheid shirt that Bobby wore earlier. This is chains being torn in two, similar to how the Backrooms duplicates Clark and makes him something new. Clark himself is kind of being torn in two in general, as part of him wants to be an architect while the other has to sell furniture. As Bobby enters, we also see that the way the light shines creates what appears to be two shadows. The door on the floor seems to have a sort of mold growing out of it as well, which is similar to the mold that we see in Missing Persons and Found Footage 2. We also have a clothes stand back in the main room like the one Mary uses later, and the caveman's been torn up as well. Now, I absolutely shat myself the first time watching it, as I thought this was someone's head. It's not though, and when Clark and Kat come down, we see a torn up Async hazmat suit, which many presume to be the remains of Naren worn. I do think this is Pirate Clark's lair as well, and we see as he emerges in just a bit. Bobby then rushes back up the ramp, and I love how he's then yanked back down. It's such a horrifying moment, and we just hear his screams coming from the tunnel. Before he's pulled, Bobby also says,
"What are you saying?"
Here. Hey, deep breath.
What kind of fucking knot is this?
I did find this line of dialogue interesting, as it seems to suggest that Clark deliberately tied a knot that would be difficult to get out of. Might be reaching there, he might have been doing it for his safety, but the bed's then pulled with a rope attached to it, and the three then fall into the basement. Bobby's pulled through a door at the end, and while Kat goes after him, Clark grabs the camera. I don't know if you do this in real life, but obviously he's desperate to get some proof. Climbing out the other side, he then comes across the body of Naren and also a smashed mirror. This gives the idea of a distorted reflection, but it could have also been done by Pirate Clark. He's someone who finds it difficult to face up to what he is, and he may have smashed it in rage and shame. Running through the complex, he also passes by the crutch he used when filming the commercial. There's also another pile of furniture and some sofas embedded in the floor, which we see plenty of throughout the movie and series. We then get a recreation of the original Backrooms image from 4chan. It's a great Easter egg that really hammers home how far this concept has come, with another image from the store being recreated right after this. We then get one of the biggest scares of the movie in the Christmas tree room. Now, I did wonder if this was also another capitalism metaphor. I know you love hearing metaphors about capitalism, but Christmas is pretty much a holiday that's built around buying stuff and being nice to people, of course, and spreading love and Christmas cheer, but also capitalism.
I'm giving none of this to charity.
It creates a nice juxtaposition too, as we have this festive, joyful thing set to the backdrop of the scariest place on Earth. We also have human statues embedded in the ground around it. It's unclear if these are just statues or mannequins, but some have suggested they're actually failed still lifes. There's even some nightmare takes on this too, and it could be people that got stuck while passing through a null zone. But the statues themselves could represent the family that Clark wanted and how it never materialized. Any parent, mate, any parent will tell you the biggest event of the year for your kids is Christmas Day. So that really adds to it. Later at the dinner table, Clark tries to create a family and they all have dinner together. Even Pirate Clark is a bit like a baby, so I do think that's a read you can have here, and it's one that I have just come up with too, so I do think you will have that read. Clark then makes his way to the other side of the tree and finds the wheelchair lamp still guy. Misremembered by the complex, he's missing his legs and seemingly only able to turn his lamp on and off. Out from behind him emerges the Barbara still life, so if this is a dream of his, it makes sense she would be here. She's in the real world, but the kids aren't, which is why the statues could be in the floor. She's also holding on at the top of her head, almost like she knows the scalping scene's coming soon. From the behind the scenes stuff with Wendigoon, we also know that the Christmas tree room looks a lot like the throne room. If we jump back to earlier in the movie, the film Clark was watching on TV was Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, so this could be a manifestation of that moment. Clark then runs past some more Christmas theme rooms and beneath a green light before finally reaching the pool room. There's a huge human face emerging from the wall in the style of a Greco-Roman statue, which is a common motif in the Backrooms media. There's also a bunch of signs for McKee Road, which is where Clark's furniture store's located at. He then comes across a large swimming pool area dead end and goes to leave before hearing banging on the wall. Kat is screaming on the other side and she pleads for him to let her in. However, he just looks very confused and asks where she is, which is when she responds.
I'm on the other side of the glass.
Now, I can't help but notice a connection here to Mary's book and the idea of the window within. Where Kat sees glass, Clark sees a wall, potentially showing how the barrier is becoming more opaque as he travels deeper into the complex. He no longer has that window as he's accepting the fact that he doesn't need to change. He eventually decides he doesn't need connection, so that could explain why he doesn't see a window here. He's literally unable to see Kat on the other side because he's put up this barrier. This moment is also similar to the one from Found Footage 3, however, there it plays out differently, in that the character Ravi finds himself in a backrooms recreation of a family home where he speaks to a father through some sort of null zone. However, there the father is seemingly in the real world and years into the future from Ravi's perspective. So while there's similar ideas on the surface, the execution's very different. As the pair try and figure out what's happening, a big figure, who presumably is Pirate Clark, then picks up the camera. Kat screams for Clark to look behind him, and the footage then cuts out. Now, we don't know who grabbed the camera for definite, but yeah, again, I believe it's Pirate Clark. We see the height it goes up to as he lifts it up, and this is far beyond how tall that Barbara is. Him picking this up could also be because it's something that Clark did earlier. Later on in the film, the pirate eats Clark, and this comes after Clark eats the still life. So the pirate is simply copying Clark, and it consumes him because he consumes another person. So the fact that Clark has been running with the camera could explain why it picks it up here. Because yeah, you would think it would just go on the attack instead of grabbing that, but that's why it does it, potentially. We then cut to Mary's home, which is kind of like the Backrooms itself. Furniture's piled up, blocking the doorway, and there's a feeling of this being like an empty void. Upon going out, she's then swarmed by her mother, who comes at her much like a still life. The wall is then smashed in the vision, and though this is something harrowing, it's also a symbol of freedom. Waking up and looking at the handprint, this is a manifestation of her connection to the past and its trauma. It's only upon using this to break free that she's able to go beyond it. She then gets a call from Clark, who says,
I opened the window. I won't be coming back.
Driving to the store, we then see the seagulls and homeless man. Now, I did wonder if this trolley could even represent the collection of things that kind of just gets piled on top of each other in the Backrooms. They're all taken away from what their original purpose was and just empty vessels and shells of themselves. For example, the homeless man shakes a bottle, and bottles are of course normally filled with liquids. However, this is empty, so it's now no longer really got a purpose. So people have thrown it away, but it still exists in a sort of memory of the past, even though it's moved beyond its context. Mary is also called Mary Klein, which is a nod to the Klein bottle. This is a mathematical shape with no inside or outside boundary. A lot like the bottle here.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
We're not reaching. We then cut to Phil and see an article stating that Async received a federal grant. Phil then sits down to watch a movie, which is none other than The Never-Ending Story. I did wonder if this is a nod to the Backrooms being infinite and how its never-ending nature could be hiding many stories. He then sees the Cap and Clark ad, and all of a sudden the penny drops. As for Mary, she goes inside the store and sees a mannequin of a pirate at the front. This is foreshadowing the reveal later on, and mannequins are a lot like the still life. They seem like people from a distance, but once you're up close and personal, you see that's not the case. She then passes by the beach picture and we see a sign at the back saying how there's more downstairs. This is framed like an arrow and it's such a nice way to lead her down there, especially with the tease of there being much more down there, which there is.
What? Oh my god!
Mary then decides to go through the doorway. The door being in a wall also reflects her own doorway to escape and how that was created in her home when the construction team broke through. She then looks up and sees some wind chimes. These are a bit of a deep cut and they appear in level 8 cave systems and level 137B of the Bird of the Moth. However, the concept of levels is from the wider Backrooms lore and not part of Kane's series, so this could just be a coincidence. Wind chimes are also something that you'd never have in a basement, as obviously there's no bloody wind down there.
What?
But these highlight that something is blowing through, which then pushes Mary to move towards the doorway. Watching a fly pass through the barrier, she then decides to go through the looking glass. The fly later returns and lands on Mary's shoulder just before she's knocked out by Clark, and it's a nice way to bookend the scene, but was actually a happy accident in real life.
So originally the fly did not go through the wall before. Originally there was some other reworking there, and so yes, happy accident, as is life and as is art in general. Most of the time that fly was real and it kept coming back and we kept referring to it as just the fly. And so it kind of forced its way. It loves the spotlight, so it got its way into the film, and we found a way to sort of work it in.
A severed hand can also be seen near the stop sign with flies buzzing around it. It's possible that this belongs to Kat and came from when he was dismembering her. However, it could also be playing off Mary's memories and the hand she placed in the concrete to make the imprint. Heading past where the caveman was, we see remnants of it broken on the floor and also the camera smashed on the wall. Later on, we see Phil looking at a picture of Clark and Pirate Clark, and I do think that, yeah, he smashed it in this moment. Now this could also be because he doesn't want to face up to what he's done and therefore doesn't want anyone seeing him. Going deeper, she then comes across the mural, which is similar to wall writings that we see throughout the web series. This is something that's also in the Portal games, and in the second one, players come across some similar writings on the wall of Aperture Labs. Kane said he loved the idea that you can traverse through this place and realize that you're not the first to do so. There's also potentially a link to the idea of cave paintings here, which isn't a total reach given the caveman imagery we've seen elsewhere. Cave paintings are obviously a record and memory of the past though, which reflects the idea that the backrooms preserve things. It's a bit more unhinged than the one that Mary's just seen on the whiteboard though, and is clearly Clark marking things that he's seen. Now, I do think this represents elements of the future as well, and it kind of seems like Mary's escape. We have the figure reaching for a window, and this is something that Mary's been trying to break through. They're holding something which resembles the coat rack that she later uses to defend herself. The window also represents the idea of escaping, whereas Pirate Clock represents staying stuck in the backrooms. That's what's trying to pull her down, and she's stuck between the two. We also have people in hazmat suits around the side, which does make it seem that Clock's encountered async. Now you can also spot the text, "Tables don't bleed blood," which is probably in reference to the still lifes. In an interview with Smosh, Kane was asked if there was food in the back rooms, and he responded by saying,
So like on the scale between soup and table, like how close to table are you able to get?
During the dinner scene, we then see Clark cut open a still life and pull out some sort of substance. It resembles upholstery stuffing, and he remarks that it's edible. Still lifes themselves are a lot like furniture, and though some have movement, for the most part, they just sit around and have very limited functions. Much like the actual furniture that we see around the place, in that they're kind of just set dressing. Who does bleed though is Pirate Clark, so he's somewhat different to the other entities. This is perhaps due to Clark's prolonged exposure to the backrooms, and we only see Pirate Clark bleed after he eats the real Clark. So perhaps the backrooms didn't know how to copy blood until that happened. We also see the text, "The floor plan changed again. Roof is wrong. I don't know who signed the plans, but the handwriting looks like mine." Now this obviously describes the way the complex changes as it remembers the real world. The handwriting looking like Clark's also probably isn't literal and likely describes how, although the complex is uncanny, he seems to recognize elements of it from his own life. At the bottom left is also a drawing resembling a calendar with crosses in blue and red. This is accompanied by the text, "Here and now is a two-way street." This could be Clark's attempt at tracking time as he comes and goes from the complex. We know that time doesn't function normally, so the idea of here and now becomes completely meaningless. The two-way street could also be playing into the opposing ideas of Mary and Clark, who head in opposite directions. The mural also spirals out, and this represents Clark's descent into madness. He then appears from behind a corridor almost like a still life. He's shot so the space completely surrounds him, and it makes it seem like he's been consumed by the backrooms. He says, which reminded me of the original 4chan post about how if you hear something, something's heard you. She then asks how long he's been here, and he struggles to answer. There's no definitive answer for how long it's been since she last saw him, but judging by the pile of bills at the furniture store door, it could be anywhere from weeks to several months. However, that's just from Mary's perspective. Since time works differently within the complex, Clark could have been there much longer. They then hear the foreboding footsteps of Pirate Clark approaching, and Clark gives away the twist.
It's only me. You know.
Whoa! Spoiler alert, mate! Mary's then kidnapped, and we transition from a light to the windows of her mother's hospital. This, too, is a gigantic vacant space, and her mother appears there much like a still life. She's completely vacant and also in a wheelchair, akin to the guy with the lampshade. Mary's then shown in the corner of the house, which marries with the idea she's boxed in. We then get a wide shot of the home and descend through the floors. Mary's shut in, and it plays upon the idea that we put walls up and box ourselves in because of our trauma. We then move through the floors, which, like I said, I think represents generation loss. However, I did wonder if it also represents memories. Over time, memory changes and distorts things, and the way the room was loses its identity. It becomes something rather haunting, and it's here that Clark repeats the book passages we heard earlier.
As you walk through life, the untrained mind accumulates loops, habits.
These loops are based around patterns of behaviour that ultimately keep us stuck in a cycle. When Mary smashes the handprint, she breaks her loop, but Clark stays stuck in his because he refuses to change. And thus, the character has nowhere to go, so, dead.
When I was a child, I learned to push people away before they could hurt me. And now, as an adult, I'm still stuck. Right where I started. Alone.
They're joined by the lampshade guy and also some guy with a beard that I have seen some people say is actually the electrician from earlier. That's not the case though, and if you go back and watch that, you can see that it's a totally different person. We also have Clark's wife, and on the opposite side of the room, we have what I think is the picture, albeit a little different. We then get the movie's explanation for the still lifes and backrooms.
This place builds them. Or actually more like it remembers them. And the more times it remembers something, the less it does.
This was actually massive for the fan community because it was the first time anything about the complex has been properly explained. He then introduces the group, guessing what they might have been in the real world, but pauses and stays silent when it comes to Barbara. This is because, unlike the others, he knows exactly who she is. Clark then calls them an improvement on the original, and it's clear this is impacted by his worldview. He saw his employees as his friends because he had a twisted view of his relationships with them. However, they weren't his pals and were just people he could use. One improvement he mentions is that they can't feel anything as well, which we see when he cuts the guy up. Now this is something he values because of how he hurts people. He's unable to push people away if they feel nothing, and therefore to him, the still life seem better. It leads to a very twisted scene, and even keeping Kat's head in a freezer shows that he views people like objects.
They simply exist. Like furniture.
This also ties back to what he said about tables not bleeding. Now why I think he had to kill Kat is because unlike the still lifes, she's someone who continuously questioned or was annoyed by him throughout the movie, which as we know is something that makes him angry. We don't really know how she died, but she was on the other side of the wall, so it's more than likely they reunited. I'm guessing that she then condemned him for taking them there and getting Bobby killed. I feel like Clark would have been unable to handle the criticism and likely would have killed her because of this. However, another possibility is that Pirate Clark did it because of what Clark says.
I tried to help her, but she just...
But either way, it is quite ambiguous. Him trying to help her could have also been in a literal sense from Pirate Clark, or even just trying to make her stay in the complex. Feel like if she wanted to leave, he would make sure she couldn't. We also see exactly how Clark sustained himself. He's been consuming the still lifes, and in an opposite to this, a still life ends up consuming him. I also saw a theory that Clark may be a still life himself at this point, and that's apparently because the scar's missing from his forehead. Now, I don't know if people were watching one of those dodgy copies of the films that a pirate might get you themselves, but this detail is definitely in the film. which also makes it a bit ironic that the copy didn't give the full picture. But Clark then insists she tells him he did nothing wrong, and the pair go back through the roleplay. This is Clark entering his loop and going back to the moment he's unable to move on from. Even this place is a recreation of his home, and he dies in the embodiment of a memory that he simply can't move on from. Barbara also refuses to get the lights, and Clark gives us a bit of info.
I tried this exercise with her before, it doesn't go anywhere.
I do think this highlights that Barbara doesn't work with it because he's refusing to see things from her side. Eventually, Mary breaks the act and tells Clark his wife left him because he blames everyone else. She's done trying to help him because all it's done is put her in this dangerous position, and she's finally starting to break free of her loop. She just wants to leave and says he can stay stuck in his loop, which is ultimately what Clark wants to hear. All he cares about is how people perceive him, and thus he needs this to be co-signed by someone else. But in doing this, that basically means there's no growth left. The Backrooms is just a place that repeats the past and makes things worse and worse and worse. If we live our lives where we constantly look back to these moments, then ultimately we'll grow to be better. If we don't move on, then we'll just keep revisiting the past, but it will be worse each time because we'll be stuck due to that moment holding us back. The only person who gets out of this is Mary because she accepts in this moment that she actually can't help him. Pirate Clark then arrives and the Barbara still life flees, which many have taken to be a sign that Clark was abusive in their marriage. Unlike the real Barbara though, she's unable to escape and gets stuck in the corner of the room. Pirate Clark then eats Clark, and we see later on in the film that the two get along fine, so it's notable that Pirate Clark switches up on the character here. If we accept that Pirate Clark is a manifestation of his repressed true self, then regular Clark's the mask. However, because Mary has just validated the fact he doesn't need to change, there's no longer any need for regular Clark. His inner darkness has consumed him, and now there's no real reason to carry on. What the pirate is, that's the real Clark, and the Clark that we've seen in the movie is him just putting on a front, until this moment anyway. Now, the big Pirate Clark guy was played by Robert Bobrovskis, whose name I've messed up quite a lot, pretty much every time I've tried to talk about it. I am going to have to learn it though, as I think the guy is going to be a big name in Hollywood. He also starred as the baby thing at the end of Alien Romulus, and due to his height, he creates a really imposing figure. Mary then runs through the neighborhood before passing by more suns in a room with a glowing green light. We mentioned earlier how Ivan Beck saw a green glow due to a solar flare, so it is notable that these appear alongside each other. As for the glow itself, nothing is confirmed, but it's widely speculated that this is the purest form of the complex. While the various rooms we see are remembered places of the real world, the glow seems to be the active act of remembering. It's appeared throughout the series, but most notably in fan footage too, where it's coupled with the architecture changes around Madison. It appears in moments where the complex is actively changing and reconstructing itself. She then run past some copies of the wind chimes before running on some sofas. I got a lot of flashes of alien isolation here, and personally, I would have just hidden below them. She then hurts her leg doing this and kind of mirrors the limp that Pirate Clark has. Upon going through a cat flap, she then sees a complex with endless repeating rooms that go into a dark pit. They're trying to copy the floor above them, but missing out on some details each time. So the further down they go, they just become nothing but darkness because eventually, that's all that remains. According to Wendigoon, this was also done on Blender, and as someone who hates heights, I actually got a lot of vertigo as she started crawling up the staircase. Climbing through the roof, we then get a nice kind of fake out when we think she might be back in the basement. The store has pretty much been recreated one for one now, and this could be because of its proximity to the doorway. Even the chair is there now as well, but this is quickly revealed to just be a copy. It's here that we then get the big showdown with a gas trap working to weaken the pirate. Wendigoon also said that this is why Mary survives, because it just doesn't have the strength to rip her apart. It also slows Mary down with Pirate Clark grabbing her. She then uses the handprint to escape and takes her own trauma to take down the big bad. The final strike shatters the concrete, and this symbolizes her letting go. Throughout the film, it's been a physical manifestation of her inability to move on from the past and her need to help others. Here, she uses it to defeat the manifestation of Clark's past, which is someone she previously had an instinctual need to help. Mary then goes to a corridor, and she looks almost sympathetically at the pirate as it struggles to grab her. As a therapist, she would try and understand why something's the way it is, and I think she finally sees him as a representation of Clark's lowest points. It's here that Async then capture her. She passes by what appears to be Threshold 31, which is something that comes from Kane's other work. We then see MRI results and watch as she goes past the lab where they're working on the pirate. This is similar to what they did to the dead body that they found in Missing Persons and also the autopsy report. He's now just something to study though, and all the remnants of Clark are now just lost to memory. We also see stacks of the caveman before she's taken to a room for questioning. Mary's observed through a two-way mirror, now putting her on the other side of the glass. In her childhood home, she was on the other side observing those outside, but now the tables have turned. There's also a warning sign about strong magnetic fields, so I'm guessing this is somewhere that they used to run MRI scans. Meeting Phil, he then begins to ask her questions, and we can see the blue sky in the window behind her. However, this looks like a fake one, and it makes us question whether we're still in the complex. He then shows her photos, including one of Clark and Pirate Clark, with the latter being redacted. Shows they've moved through the compound together though, and possibly explains why the camera was smashed up earlier. He then starts to talk about acing and how they began exploring the backrooms. Humanity first moved across land, and then conquered the sea, and within the last century, we've also moved to space. But a discovery like this would be an extra frontier that people would be desperate to explore. Wendigoon brought up in this video how this would be seen as the final frontier and that people would naturally expect lives to be lost exploring this space. Just in the same way, you know, lives were lost when we explored the Arctic and stuff. You just expect these explorations to come with a cost. Async has thrown everything they can at it though and truly want to understand it. However, we are left unsure whether Mary will be held in custody or if she's even gonna survive this. One detail I love about this moment as well is that the walls in this scene are also yellow and white. The yellow at the bottom represents the backrooms and the white above represents the real world and freedom. Here, her face is framed between the two, signifying how she's caught between the two worlds. Although she's escaped the complex, she isn't free and may never be. Given what we know about how Async planned to deal with Peter, it is possible that they may plan to kill her, with Phil insisting that it's not up to him. Mary then smiles, recognizing the irony of her situation. She spent her childhood trapped behind glass, unable to experience the world beyond it, and that now appears to be her fate at Async. I do wonder as well if she could perhaps even be brought into the company and work with them as a way to understand the space. Therapists, of course, need to be empathetic, and with the backrooms being built on trauma, someone like her could actually be very useful. The backrooms itself is also spilling over with her pain, and we see the building citing signs from the start. This includes her home and therapy room, as well as the launch of her book. There's also a missing poster for Kat and Bobby before we then move to their neighborhood. Lastly is Cap and Clark's shop before we close in on a still life of Mary. The clone is a copy of her trauma, and it's a negative memory left down there to populate it. Seated by the window, it sits still, facing the other direction, tragically mirroring her experience as a child, not allowed to look at the outside world. Now, even if Mary manages to get out of here, there'll still always be a piece that remains behind. Just like the imprint on the concrete outside her home, this lingering memory will always be stuck there. Just as it imprinted on her, she also imprinted on it. They're now forever connected, and we know this because Mary hasn't gone back there since this interrogation. And yet, it's still generating things about this questioning, even though it's happening in this moment. Now, I could also highlight that she does return there, and upon re-entering it, it starts to create this. Because of that, it possibly confirms that she went to work for Async and helped pioneer them discovering the backrooms. However, I do tend to lean more towards the former. Backrooms is all about trauma, and this would be the most horrifying experience of her life. So the Backrooms has taken this and created a copy of her. Now the Backrooms doesn't just copy trauma, but in many ways, the traumatic events of the past seem to ensure that that's what it leans towards. If someone enters it with a lot going on, then they will naturally fill the space with those thoughts. Others will then enter and experience them and thus have their own trauma created from those thoughts. Creates a loop in which trauma leads to more trauma. This cycle then spreads out and infects all those that come into contact with it. It's a never-ending loop that ultimately creates more trauma. Just in the same way Mary's mother caused her own child to have a cycle of trauma because of her own trauma, we'll forever see these cycles repeat until the end of time. Closes out what's a brilliant, thought-provoking film, and I cannot wait to see where Kane Parsons goes next. I know everyone keeps saying he's 20. Did you know he's 20 years old? Did you know this? But fucking hell, what an incredible piece of work. In a good way. Hope you've enjoyed us going back through it as well. I'm absolutely dying in this pirate costume. I feel very bad for Pirate Clark, and I would of course love to hear all your thoughts on the film. please drop a like as well. And if you want to keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure that you check us out at Heavy Spoilers on Instagram. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos like this every single week? And if you click the join button, you get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. Costs just 99 cents a month. It's cheaper than anything Pirate Clock's got. We will not be getting rip-offs sprayed around here. But yeah, I hope that isn't a lot to you. Less than $12 a year for about 100 hours of content as well. Huge thank you if you do that though. It really makes videos like this possible. And yeah, I just appreciate all you guys' support because you really mean the world to me. Anyway, if you want something else to watch, we've got a big breakdown on screen right now of Obsession. And hopefully I see you over there right after this. If not though, thank you for watching this video. I've been your host Paul. You've been the best. I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Peace.